Before we begin, I want to ask you something. Not casually, not as background noise while you scroll, but genuinely. If you're someone who believes that stories are more than entertainment, if you've ever stayed awake at night replaying a conversation that changed you, if you understand that sometimes the bravest thing a person can do is whisper no instead of screaming yes, then this channel is for you. So take a moment right now. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Join this community because here we don't just tell stories about love. We explore loneliness. We talk about healing. We sit inside uncomfortable truths. And we honor the kind of courage that doesn't announce itself, but quietly rearranges a life from the inside out. Today's story isn't simple. It isn't easy. And it won't leave you the same. The rain pressed softly against the wide kitchen window of her small house in Portland. It wasn't a dramatic storm. No sand, no lightning, just that steady, familiar drizzle the city seemed to specialize in. The kind that blurred street lights into halos and softened the edges of buildings until everything looked half-remembered. The world beyond the glass appeared suspended, as if time itself had decided to move more slowly. Emily stood barefoot on cool tile, a ceramic mug cradled between her hands. The coffee inside had gone cold long ago, but she hadn't noticed the exact moment warmth turned to bitterness. She hadn't noticed a lot of small things lately. 3 years since the divorce. At first, the silence that followed it felt like oxygen after years in a crowded room. No more looping arguments. No more compromise disguised as devotion. No more careful phrasing to avoid unnecessary conflict. She could finally hear her own thoughts. She could eat dinner at 9 p.m. without being questioned. She could rearrange furniture without debate. She could leave dishes in the sink overnight and not feel judged by the clatter of someone else's disapproval. She called it peace. But peace has a twin. If you're not careful, peace can slip into stillness. Stillness can become emptiness. And emptiness, if left unattended, turns quietly into loneliness. Emily had mastered living alone. She had not mastered feeling whole. Her evenings followed a predictable rhythm. Reheated leftovers. A television show murmuring in the background. She barely followed. A glass of wine she didn't particularly want, but poured out of habit. Bed earlier than necessary. Not from exhaustion, but from wanting the day to end. She told herself she was fine, but fine is a fragile word. The sound of her phone vibrating against the counter startled her more than it should have. She glanced at it absently. Then she saw the name Daniel Brooks, her nephew, and something in her chest softened. Daniel had always been different from the other children in the family. While cousins chased each other through backyards during holiday gatherings, Daniel gravitated toward adults. Toward her. He would sit beside her and ask questions. Real questions. Why do adults pretend they're okay when they're not? What makes someone brave? How do you know if you're actually happy? He had a way of asking things that didn't feel childish. It felt like he was studying the architecture of human emotion before he even fully understood his own. Even after he left for college, he remained consistent. He remembered birthdays. He called on random Tuesdays. He sent articles. He thought she'd enjoy. He noticed people. She answered immediately. Hey, Daniel. There was a pause, not the distracted pause of someone multitasking. A heavy one. Hey, and Emily. His voice sounded older, less certain. What's going on? She asked, straightening unconsciously. Another pause. I need a favor. She laughed lightly. That sounds serious. It is. At least to me. Rain continued tapping steadily against the glass. Daniel explained that graduation was approaching. His parents expected him to return home, to Chicago. A stable job nearby, a practical path, a predictable future, a safe life, a suffocating life. I feel like everyone already decided who I'm supposed to be, he admitted quietly. And I haven't even figured that out myself. Emily felt that sentence land somewhere deep. For years, she had lived the version of life that made sense on paper. Marriage, stability, routine. She told herself comfort equaled happiness. Until the night her husband sat across from her and said he needed something different. Different from her. In that moment, the carefully constructed blueprint of her future collapsed into something unrecognizable. So, she said gently, "What does this have to do with me?" He exhaled slowly. "I was hoping maybe I could stay with you for a while, just until I figure things out." The idea hit her into places at once. Disruption and warmth. Her quiet home, her structured solitude, the careful equilibrium she'd built. "You want to move to Portland?" she asked. "I trust you," he said quickly. More than anyone, being trusted, being needed. It had been a long time since she felt either. She didn't analyze the decision. She didn't list pros and cons. "You can stay," she heard herself say. Silence on the other end. Then relief. Before hanging up, his voice softened again. "There's another reason I wanted to come." "What reason?" "I'll tell you when I get there." And then the line went dead. Emily stood staring at her reflection in the dark window, rain blurring the city behind her. Something in her life had just shifted. She just didn't know how much. 2 weeks later, she stood at the airport arrival gate. Travelers moved past in waves of coats and luggage. Reunions unfolding all around her in quick embraces. Then she saw him pulling two suitcases taller than she remembered. Broader shoulders, a steadiness in the way he walked. For a split second, she didn't recognize him. The curious boy had become a man. When his eyes found hers, his face changed instantly, relief flooding into warmth. He crossed the distance and wrapped his arms around her. The hug lasted longer than expected, tighter than expected, as if he had been carrying invisible weight, and finally found somewhere safe to set it down. "It's good to see you," he murmured. "You too." She smiled. "You've changed." "So, have you?" She assumed he meant time, but there was something else in his gaze. Something searching. The house changed almost immediately. Music played in the mornings while Daniel experimented with elaborate breakfasts. Some attempts were disastrous, others surprisingly impressive. He rearranged furniture with bold confidence, fixed a shelf she'd ignored for months, insisted on cooking dinner twice a week, though he chronically oversalted everything. The silence dissolved. Conversations filled the evenings. Real conversations about books, about politics, about fears and ambitions. He listened, not the distracted listening of someone waiting for their turn to speak, but focused, intentional listening. He remembered details she mentioned days earlier. One evening, he came home with flowers and placed them casually on the kitchen table. "What's this for?" she asked. "Look nice." Thought the house needed color. Her ex-husband had rarely noticed such things. Days turned into weeks. Morning coffee together, shared grocery runs, late-night movies on the couch. Life didn't feel restarted. It felt rediscovered. And yet, sometimes she caught him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking. Not in a way that felt aggressive, but emotional, intent, heavy, with something unsaid. When their eyes met, he would look away as if holding a thought too dangerous to release. Then the rain returned one evening, mirroring the day he first called. They were halfway through a movie when Daniel muted the television. "And Emily, can I ask you something?" She turned toward him. "Do you ever regret things you didn't do?" The question hung between them. "Everyone regrets something," she replied carefully. "I mean big things," he pressed. "Like not choosing happiness when you had the chance." Her throat tightened. After her divorce, she had replayed years of compromise. Wondered if she had mistaken endurance for love. Sometimes, she admitted, "I wonder if I stayed too long trying to fix something that wasn't meant to last." Daniel nodded slowly. "I think people stop themselves from loving because they're afraid of judgment." She smiled faintly. "You sound philosophical tonight." "I've been thinking." The space between them felt different. Charge. "You said there was another reason you came." She reminded him gently. "Are you going to tell me?" His expression shifted. Serious. Vulnerable. "Yes." Her heartbeat quickened without permission. "I didn't just come to escape home," he said quietly. I came because I needed to be honest about something. She waited. I think I've been in love with you for a long time. The room stilled. Even the rain seemed to quiet. Her mind scrambled, searching for alternate meanings. Admiration, gratitude, confusion. But his face held only sincerity. That's not funny, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm not joking. The air felt heavier, thicker. She stood slowly. Daniel, I'm your aunt. Only by marriage, he replied immediately. And that marriage doesn't even exist anymore. That doesn't change the history. She said steadier. Now, it doesn't change the boundaries. He looked pained, but not ashamed. I didn't choose it. He continued. I tried to ignore it for years. I dated other people. I convinced myself it was admiration. But every time I thought about the kind of person I wanted to build a life with, it was you. His words were raw, unfiltered, and for a dangerous fleeting second, she felt something unexpected. Not desire, but recognition. Not romantic longing, but the ache of being seen. Because what he described wasn't just attraction, it was understanding. He saw her humor, her strength, her sadness, her quiet resilience. After years of feeling invisible in her marriage, that kind of attention felt intoxicating and terrifying. She took a breath. Daniel, she said softly, what you're feeling might be real, but that doesn't mean it's right. He flinched slightly. You're in a vulnerable place. She continued. You're figuring out who you are. Sometimes when someone makes us feel safe during that process, we confuse safety with love. He looked at her like she was dismantling something sacred. You think I'm confused. I think you're human. Silence. Rain against glass. I care about you, she said deeply, but not in the way you want. He swallowed. I needed to tell you. He whispered. Even if you don't feel the same. She nodded. I'm glad you were honest. That takes courage, but courage doesn't protect you from heartbreak. That night, they retreated to separate rooms. The house, once warm with easy laughter, felt fragile. The following days were careful, polite, measured. They still shared meals, still exchanged conversation. But something had shifted. An invisible line had been drawn. Emily wrestled privately with her emotions, not because she doubted her boundaries, but because she realized how deeply she missed being desired, being chosen, being the center of someone's attention. It would have been easy, dangerously easy, to lean into that feeling, to let loneliness blur morality. But she understood something important. Loneliness is loud, but integrity is quiet, and quiet things often matter more. One evening, Daniel knocked on her bedroom door. Can we talk? She nodded. I've been thinking. He said carefully, I don't regret telling you, but I don't want to make you uncomfortable. I don't want to lose you. You won't, she assured him. He exhaled. I think I confused a lot of things. You were the first adult who ever really listened to me, who made me feel understood. I built that into something bigger in my head. That's natural, she said gently. I'm going to look for an apartment, he added. Not because I'm running away, but because I need space to figure myself out. Her chest tightened, but she nodded. That sounds healthy. Weeks later, he found a small place across town. The day he packed his things, the house felt quieter than it had in months. But not empty, different. He hugged her tightly at the door. Thank you, he said, for everything, even the hard part. She smiled softly, especially the hard part. When the door closed behind him, rain began again. She stood by the window just like she had months before. But something inside her had changed. She realized she hadn't said yes because she needed to be needed. She had said yes because she still had the capacity to care. And when tested, she had chosen integrity over loneliness, over validation, over the seductive comfort of being someone's answer. Her life was quiet again, but it wasn't. Empty because this time the silence felt earned. And sometimes the most powerful love stories aren't about who we choose. They're about what we refuse. If this story moved you, If it made you think about boundaries, about courage, about the complicated beauty of being human, subscribe, because here we don't just watch stories, we grow with them.